to the Consent Decree Monitoring Team's Facebook Live session. We have Lead Monitor Ken Thompson.
Good evening.
Deputy Monitor Seth Rosenthal.
Good evening.
I'm Ray Kelly. I'm the Lead Community Liaison. And on the back side of the camera is Donnell Wharton. He's our Community Engagement Coordinator. We also have a couple of our neighborhood liaisons in the room, which we'll introduce you to later. So tonight's question and answer session is going to be focusing on things that we're going to cover tomorrow and just giving you a heads up. This is going to be the first of many reminders I give you guys today that tomorrow is our quarterly public report forum at 1400 East Oliver Street at the Oliver Community Center. So we're going to start right off with a recap of what's been going on since our last session from Lead Monitor Ken Thompson and Seth Rosenthal.
Since our last session, we've been quite busy, as we always are. We're focusing on a number of things, primarily the training. As you will recall, last year we spent a substantial amount of time working on policies. Most of those policies now are in place, and we're training on use of force and to some extent fair and impartial policing that's attached to that. We're also spending some time dealing with interaction with the youth, and staffing and supervision has been a big issue this quarter. Staffing meaning how we figure out how to come up with the right staffing plan so we have the right number of police officers in the department and primarily in patrol. And of course, supervision, we're trying to figure out the best way to get the supervisors to do their job, which is to manage the patrolmen and the other officers who work under them. So Seth, you may want to add something to that.
I mean, that largely covers the waterfront. As the monitoring team, we've been spending a lot of time at the training academy in the last couple of months. It was at the beginning of June, so a little over a month ago, that BPD began to roll out this new training on use of force and certain aspects of fair and impartial policing. And they're running classes of up to 36 officers, 2 classes going at any one time, Monday through Thursday of every week. It's a 2-day training, so they're taking 2 classes, essentially of 72 officers, Monday and Tuesday, and then again on Wednesday and Thursday. And they're doing it each week through the summer, and they should get through the entire department by the beginning of October. So all the officers should be trained on the new use of force policies by then. We've seen steady improvement in the instruction. It's really an impressive body of work that the Training Academy, with our assistance and the assistance of the Justice Department, has put together on use of force. They're employing best practices, adult learning concepts, so that the learning is completely interactive. It's not just, an instructor standing in front of a classroom giving a lecture based on a PowerPoint presentation. It's actual constructive engagement with the students, with the officers, using scenarios, video scenarios, written scenarios, and then live scenarios through a simulator or in the gym, where they're taken through certain use of force scenarios and being instructed on how to respond properly and consistent with department policy. Department policy is actually more strict than the Constitution is now, so that officers are required to use only force that is necessary, reasonable, and proportional, which again is a more stringent standard than the Constitution. It's close to the constitutional standard, but it's more stringent. And the whole idea is for officers to de-escalate, not to get into situations that require the use of force in the first place. And so that is really the emphasis of this program. It was actually reviewed by a group of community members. There's actually a community review training committee that includes a member from each of the 9 police districts, as well as representatives from a bunch of different organizations around town and nationally, including the Office of Public Defender, the State's Attorney's Office, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People's Legal Defense Fund. In any event, at the end of May, they all participated in a pilot training program and provided additional feedback before BPD finalized the curriculum on use of force. Their feedback was incorporated into the curriculum, and now you see that playing out in the classroom. So I've been talking about training for a few minutes now, but it is really because that has been the focus of a number of members of the monitoring team, myself included, over the course of the past couple of months. In fact, I spent all day today at the Training Academy observing use of force session. Ken?
I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about all of our favorite subjects, which is internal affairs, which is now the Police Integrity Bureau. All of you will recall last month a judge was forced to dismiss 12 cases, and there are a lot of reasons why that happened. It's primarily because that unit has a number of challenges that we have been working with for well over a year. The new commissioner has come in, and one of the plans he has is to try to figure out a way to streamline the process so that the more serious cases can be handled in internal affairs proper. So what is being proposed right now, and it's still in it's on the drawing board, but what we expect to happen is that the non-serious cases, and when I say non-serious or the minor cases, it would be things like police officer not wearing his uniform appropriately, or failing to appear for court, or missing a medical appointment. Things like that, where it's objectively clear that these are minor violations. The idea would be to have those cases resolved at the district level so that the more serious cases can get the attention that they deserve in internal affairs. We want the community to have sufficient time to have enough input so that the community can have some say into how this final policy is drafted and ultimately becomes a policy, hopefully. But in the meantime, because it is important that steps be taken now to at least alleviate some of the burden that is in internal affairs, because there are so many cases and it's short-staffed. There will in all likelihood be a pilot program that will deal with some of the issues that I just talked about a few minutes ago, which would be the minor offenses, and that hopefully will relieve some pressure on the unit, and they can spend more time addressing, again, the more serious charges, so that we don't find the department in the place where they were last month, where cases are not being handled within the 1 year period that the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights requires.
And it bears mentioning, Ken, that no complaint involving an encounter with a community member can be classified as a minor violation or an alleged minor violation. Minor violations are the kind of violations that Ken discussed. But if there's a civilian or a community member that makes a complaint involving an interaction with a police officer, that is not something that would be handled under the pilot program at the district level. That will always be handled by the Public Integrity Bureau as a major allegation.
So, questions?
Questions yet, Ray?
So, even though you guys' presentation was great, our first question is from resident Keisha Patterson. And our question is, BPD made a point in today's officer-involved fatal shooting that the monitoring team responded. Could you describe the protocols that alert you guys to the scene, and what access you have and reports you produce on events like today?
Happy to do it. Let me talk to you first of all about the protocol. The way it works, and we've expanded the protocol to, goes beyond now just officer-involved shootings. We have required the police department to notify the monitoring team about any, what we would consider to be a significant event. And what happens is, I, being the lead monitor, I get a call from one or two individuals at the Baltimore Police Department that has been assigned to follow the activities that result in things, for example, like police-involved shootings or other significant events. I get a call. If for some reason they can't reach me, then the next person they would go to would be Seth. And we have a protocol. If it's not Seth, then we go down the line. But between the two of us, we're going to be available to provide coverage. Once I get a phone call, I then arrange to meet someone at the command station in the district where the offense has occurred. I show up, I am escorted to the command vehicle, and I have complete access to the scene. I get a chance to observe if there are body-worn camera footage. I get a chance to see that. What typically happens is that I'll spend sometimes 3 or 4 hours at the scene, looking at the interaction between the police and in some cases the community, but I get an idea in terms of what's going on. The next step would be usually the next day. I attend the police commissioner's briefing, and at that stage I'll get a chance to review the written reports. Various agencies, depending on the issue, contribute to this report. That report is given to me, and I share with my monitoring team. And in most cases, if there is body-worn camera footage, in all cases where that's available, we, being the monitoring team, will get that footage so that we can review it. So that's the process. In terms of today, that process was followed. I got a call, I guess probably a little after 7 this morning, shortly after the event. Arrangements were made for me to meet the various personnel on the 2100 block of Maryland Avenue, and I attended the internal briefing, and then I went down to the hospital where the official briefing was made by the commission. So that's kind of the process, and that's the one we will follow pretty much throughout the course of this consent decree process.
So anybody else have any questions, please reach out to us right now. We're once again preparing everyone for tomorrow's quarterly public hearing with the monitoring team, so we can kind of give you an update about what's going to happen on July the 25th at the public hearing at the federal court. So if you have concerns or ideas, or like you said, just want to be in the know of what the monitoring team is about to report out or how you can be engaged, reach straight out to us. So we just topped in with another question from Dr. Kevin Daniels. So his question is, I believe this may have been addressed, but they discussed training and from our sessions. Community wanted to know what level of cultural competency training they were getting. Many of the officers said not much, or it was not effective.
Seth?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. So the way that training is being rolled out this year is we decided in conjunction with the Justice Department and BPD to handle up front probably the 3 kind of biggest substantive areas within the consent decree: use of force, stop, searches, and arrests, and fair and impartial policing, which confronts the issue of discriminatory policing. This first tranche of training, the one that's ongoing right now, covers use of force and some aspects of fair and impartial policing, in particular, the effect of implicit bias on threat assessment, on how officers perceive threats, and how that affects decisions to use force. The next tranche will deal with stop, searches, and arrests and the aspects of fair and impartial policing that affect stop, search, and arrest activity. And the final tranche is a standalone tranche on fair and impartial policing, and it's that tranche, the curriculum for which will be developed later this year, and the training which will be delivered next year, will focus on cultural competency. That is one of the aspects of that tranche on standalone tranche on fair and impartial policing that's going to be covered. We haven't begun, BPD has not begun to draft that curriculum yet. There has been preliminary discussion about including a module on cultural competency and bringing in folks from the outside to help with that instruction, not simply having academy instructors deliver the instruction.
And just to piggyback on what Seth said, so one thing that came into fruition this year was the Community Training and Review Committee, where that very same issue of cultural competency and the fair and impartial policing piece, as well as implicit bias, is part of the first piece of the training that this review committee, which is made up of a very diverse representation of Baltimore City and all of its cultures, where this was actually brought up in that first meeting and preemptively the question that you asked now is being addressed as it's being asked. So what that committee does is bring in concerns like the ones you just addressed, Dr. Daniels, in real time while they're crafting these curriculums and getting ready for that training. So now, when this proposed policy draft is presented, it already has input from direct people in the community.
So Seth, you used the term outside, and I think we all understand what you mean, but when you say outside folks, you're not talking about people coming in from California or Canada, you're talking about something else. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a lot of experts, both locally and nationally, in, you know, fair and impartial policing, non-biased policing, cultural competency, and I think the idea is to draw on some of that expertise, potentially local expertise, to help BPD with that mode of instruction. That's what we're talking about.
Okay. So the next question is, the scenario in the training materials regarding excessive force mostly included events in areas outside of Baltimore. Since the consent decree stemmed from Freddie Gray's death and the subsequent uprising, why doesn't training use events that actually happened in Baltimore?
I'm happy to answer that. Yeah, I mean, you know, this is something that we've noted. There are a couple of incidents involving BPD that are incorporated into the use of force training. There could be more. My understanding is that folks in the academy are working to incorporate more scenarios that involve BPD officers. It's difficult to incorporate stuff that's ongoing or potentially under review right now. But I agree with you, and the monitoring team agrees with you, that it makes a lot of sense to incorporate scenarios, body-worn camera footage scenarios from events involving BPD officers. I mean, just to give you an example, last December, BPD put on a training for command staff only, so for majors and above. And the reason it did so was to respond to BPD's reaction, unconstitutional reaction in many respects, to the shooting of Detective Sean Suter in November of 2017. The monitoring team, as many of you may recall, did a top-to-bottom review of BPD's response to that and found that there were aspects of BPD's response that complied with the consent decree, and there were aspects of BPD's response that did not comply with the consent decree. As to those responses that didn't comply with the consent decree, we recommended that BPD put together a training, kind of a lessons learned training from BPD's response to that incident, to that tragedy involving Detective Suter. And BPD did so and put together command staff training. But in that command staff training, you know, there was a lot of video footage, body-worn camera video footage from the response in Harlem Park to the shooting of Detective Suter and what BPD officers did, right and wrong, in response to the shooting. And there's no reason from our perspective that you couldn't use, in some respects, that very same footage when it comes not to use of force, because none of those events involved use of force, but you know, BPD is now preparing curriculum on stop, searches, and arrests, and that's where we found a lot of the problems with it, was in how BPD officers, at the behest of command staff, was stopping, searching, and arresting folks in the wake of Detective Suter's shooting. And there's no reason you couldn't use that exact same video footage that was used to train command staff to train rank and file officers too.
And let me make a point as well. This is always an evolving process, and we've had events this year, some good, some bad, that are probably good candidates for future use in the training programs. And so, I mean, as Seth indicated, the monitoring team completely agrees with your idea that we, to the extent we can, you know, we ought to use real live issues that have happened here that both the police and the community can relate to. But you know, I can assure you that as we go forward, I mean, we will constantly be reviewing, and this is one of the good things about the body-worn camera footage. I mean, we now have access to a trove of good information. Sometimes it shows bad things, sometimes it shows good things. But the point is, it's the kind of stuff that you need so that you can train the police officers so that their future conduct conforms to the requirements of the consent decree.
And I'll just add that we definitely all agree that we should use more relative training materials, but I will piggyback on Seth, where before I was a member of the monitoring team, I was actually one of a few community members invited from that community that was impacted after the Detective Suda tragedy, and that very engagement is what sparked this civilian training review committee, where the officers in the room who were receiving that resident feedback in real time actually recognized how influential that could be on how they actually train officers in that type of situation, and that birthed an ongoing effort to make sure that there are actual residents of each of these districts reviewing these curriculum as they're formed for just the reasons that you brought forward.
And Ray makes a really, really good point, because as Seth indicated earlier, we're beginning to see some progress in this department. And out of the Harlem Park episode, I mean, I've been to several police-involved shootings subsequent to that event, and where they had a real problem with what they call the command structure at the scene in the Harlem Park situation. I mean, it was too expansive. You had folks, some with the cameras on, some off. Some people didn't know what they were doing. There were people coming in and out that weren't being logged in. Well, that doesn't happen now. I mean, the command structure is set up now where it's run very tightly. Everything is done by the book, and folks are paying attention to lessons learned. And so, while the Harlem Park event was certainly not a good event overall, I think that the lessons learned are improving, are resulting in, I should say, training scenarios and training materials that are improving this department. So I think we're making progress, and we'll continue to suggest to the department that they utilize the real life situations that occur in the city, so that, again, folks in the community and the men and women in the police department can conform their conduct to conform to the consent decree.
You got anything to add, Scott?
Nope.
So this is a follow-up, and Ms. Patterson agrees. So she says this is not a question, just a comment. Progress towards achieving legitimacy could be achieved if the community sees ongoing discussions on events that impact people. Comments from you guys?
I would like her to explain a little bit more if she can. I don't know whether she can do that, but I'd like to get a little more information, and then if I can respond, I will.
So Keisha, I don't know if you heard Ken, but he was kind of asking, could you expand on what you mean by that question? I can take a stab at she's saying that, are there going to be more like open forums to discuss an incident like what happened today? And that's just my stab. Keisha, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I'm trying to guide him into the right answer for your question.
Well, and Ray, you could probably speak into this better than either me or Ken, but BPD, and specifically its consent decree implementation unit, has periodic, actually regular community forums where there is essentially an open mic for people to raise issues like that. And I think, Ray, you know how, I think they do it every other month, but I think they do at least 2 in every district within the city during the course of the years. Yeah.
So
18 during the course of every year, I think is what's going on now.
So just to clarify what our role would be in that situation is to be in the room for that conversation, to kind of record and document the feedback and what we're hearing, as well as the engagement. and those types, but it wouldn't be our role to kind of organize that conversation where if there is an incident or something which identifies some kind of conflict between a resident or a community and BPD, we would hope that we would be informed by whomever so we can make sure we're there to make sure it's under our purview. And I'm definitely in 100% agreement that conversations are important to moving forward, and real-time feedback and direct engagement is what we're trying to get into, but I don't think it would be appropriate for us to kind of lead those conversations. And one of you guys disagree?
Well, no, I don't disagree, but I think that we do have to understand our role. I mean, we are certainly, we have forums like this, we have forums like tomorrow night, we go out in the community, so we're always open to hearing discussions about any subject that fits within the consent decree, but as we have stated, on more times than I can count, as a monitoring team, our job is we don't investigate. I mean, we assess the progress or the lack of progress that the police department is making in connection with complying with the terms of the consent decree, and that is a very limited focus, which means that we will take a lot of the information in, and then we sit back at the appropriate time and we determine whether or not the city is either making no progress, reasonable progress, or they've complied with the terms of the consent decree. So that does not bar any discussion. It simply means that the forums open for those discussions are primarily being led by the police department. We will certainly entertain them when we have our public forums and when we go out in the community, but that's how we intake the information, that's how we use it.
And a big piece of what we're encouraging people to do is to be directly engaged. Like Ken just spoke, we're at a lot of different things. We're at all of the training. We're in all of the policy meetings. So we want your narrative on what you experience in these meetings. So we would ask if you have an issue or incident that you've heard in one of these community organization meetings or just a collaborative conversation, to submit that information to us as well, where though we can't be everywhere, we try to make sure that we have open access to everyone that wants to reach us. Anybody else? So while we don't have questions, I just wanted to speak on what Seth mentioned with the consent decree implementation unit. So the BPD has a civilian unit that's charged with community engagement and crafting policies and things that ensure that BPD complies with the mandates and the consent decree. And like you said, they, according to the timeline etched out by the monitoring team, have a list of community engagement meetings spread throughout the city. They actually schedule these meetings, I believe Seth was right, 18 at a time. So if you want access to that, please reach out to the monitoring team at info@bpdmonitor.com or reach directly to me, ray.kelly@bpdmonitor.com, and I can send you that list of when the consent decree implementation unit is going to meet and where they'll actually be. And as we move further into the second year, we'll see more collaboration with us and a role to kind of make sure we're both getting this feedback from you guys in the community, so as we move forward, we can be informed to try to do a better job and make sure we're engaging and reaching every population we can, and not just from the monitoring team perspective, but all the parties that are involved, so we can make sure this is a effective process as we move forward.
Both Seth and I and the other members of the team, in particular the leadership, we say this just about every day. Any chance we get to engage with someone in the community, that it is incredibly important that we get the community's feedback. And again, let me go back to something I talked about a little earlier to explain to you just how important it is, or how important it is that we evaluate and how important we think your comments are. I told you, I mentioned to you about the 12 cases that were dismissed and the concerns that a lot of us are having that cases on officers involving some serious misconduct because of technicalities. I mean, they essentially are walking away from it. And so it's really something of a crisis that has to be addressed. We could have, in terms of policies, probably looked at this thing and say, hey, let's put a huge policy in place right now to address this because it's a serious problem. And and that would not have been without some justification. But because we view the community's input so important, we knew that it was important to get the community's feedback, even on a situation that needed to be addressed promptly. It still, from our perspective, made sense to take the extra time to make sure that the community has some input in a policy that we think ultimately is going to have a lot of effect on how the police are disciplined. And so we have employed implored the city or BPD to figure out a way to put something in place, and that's how the pilot program has come about. But at the same time, before the full-blown policy comes into place, and again, we know that this needs to be done quickly, but it needs to be done in a way where we have a full opportunity to hear from the public. And so that's how important public comments or public input is, and I can't overemphasize how important it is that folks in the community give us their feedback in the many different forms that we offer.
And I agree with Kim. This has been, in my purview at least, probably the most community informed consent decree from all of my research. And that's because there are provisions in this document that mandate that the community engages, has an opportunity to give feedback, and then once again has the opportunity to give feedback on the revisions made from their feedback. So we encourage everybody to be engaged in any way you can. We are the ones that have been impacted by past practice, and the onus then falls on us to influence the changes and the new practice that is coming into fruition. So we don't have a question right now, so I'm gonna take this opportunity to drag Magdalena up here. Come on, baby girl. This is Magdalena Changas, and she's gonna introduce herself, tell you what she does, and what district she's in.
So my name is Magdalena Chungus, and I am the neighborhood liaison in the Southeast District, where I also live. And I started April with the consent decree monitoring team.
And Magdalena she's a very special asset to our team right now because she's
Community school coordinator.
bilingual.
Oh, bilingual. Okay. So also bilingual, and then I do work. My day job is as a community school coordinator in a Baltimore City public school, and Ray is doing a lot of good work engaging the youth as well. So we're collaborating on that, which I'm excited about.
So you can help me with my Spanish, huh?
Oh,
you've heard how bad I was.
I've heard that.
So as we continue these kind of informal presentations, we'll be gradually introducing you to the faces of all of our neighborhood liaisons. So if you see them in community or would like to meet your liaison and have them come to your event, reach out to us. We're the liaison and the community engagement arm are of and from Baltimore City, and we're here to help our community. So if you see us on the streets, don't feel bad, grab us by the arm. Thank you, Magdalena.
All right, Seth.
We got one last, it looks like a comment. It says, thanks for Facebook Live Q&A. Achieving police legitimacy seems like a bridge too far for people distanced from a department where public opinion is that department covered up Sean Suter's death and is still mute on those command who enable GTTF. And I'm sure our purview, as Ken and Seth both mentioned, is to oversee the implementation of the mandates and the consent decree, which is a limited focus, but the team has been very involved, like Ken said earlier, ever since the Harlem Park incident. And they've been adamant about making sure that the impacted community is involved in the changes that are going to come to their community directly. So once again, we can't really speak on personnel involved with GTTF, and we all know that investigations go on, but we're still open and accessible to all of the communities concerned.
And I will say this just about GTTF. I mean, a couple of things. One, both the judge and the monitoring team have recommended that BPD hire somebody on the outside to do an independent top to bottom review of the root causes of the GTTF scandal, not simply to look at the misconduct of individual officers, but to take a look at how something like this could have happened to make sure it doesn't happen again. We have been assured by former acting Commissioner Tuggle and now Commissioner Harrison that will happen. We have not seen movement on that yet, which is disappointing to us, but we're still hopeful that something like that is going to happen in the relatively near future. That's one thing. And then second is, I mean, there has been some fallout from the GTTF scandal, and so there have been, recommendations, internal departmental recommendations for Public Integrity Bureau or Internal Affairs investigations of certain officers whose names were mentioned during the trial. And Ken and I and members of our team have been closely following what the Public Integrity Bureau has been doing in those internal investigations. So, it's not something that the monitoring team is ignoring by any measure.
And so there's just a comment that once again that Dr. Daniels thanks us for doing a Facebook Live, because what he's saying is his report had been sent to the city and to BBD without being able to get that answer on where it all stands. So for those that don't know who Dr. Kevin Daniels is, he's from Morgan State University, and he is the one that's conducting the PACE initiative, which is police and community engagement research for Morgan State University. So I appreciate you, Dr. Daniels, and we're gonna keep trying to do what we can to at least help our communities understand it. So, anytime you can reach out to me, and I'm gonna avail my team where anytime you wanna reach out to one of us, that door is open. Thank you.
Speaking of Morgan, we're actually working with the Institute of Urban Research and have for the course of the past 9 or 10 months to do a survey, a comprehensive quantitative survey of community residents here. We're working with Dr. Ray Winbush and principal investigators, Dr. Natasha Pratt-Harris, and we're close to finalizing the report there and should be publishing the report, which is our first community survey report, by the end of this summer.
We've talked a little bit about this, and I don't hate to use the expression beat a dead horse, but let me talk a little bit about GTTF and the importance of doing what I consider to be a forensic deep dive analysis in terms of how that unit came to be what it ended up being. The department, again, from our early review of this situation back in early 2018, when we first started working in earnest, it was clear to us that there was dysfunction in a number of different areas, and none perhaps more apparent than in the Internal Affairs Division. The Gun Trace Task Force situation presents all of us with an opportunity to not only look at the shortcomings in internal affairs, because there obviously were shortcomings, but it also gives us an opportunity to figure out how to fix or how to make recommendations to the department, how to fix their policies and their protocols regarding how they supervise their police officers. It also should give the department some idea in terms of when they're developing the technology, they need to figure out ways to be able to use the technology to look at the employment history of various officers. If there are red flags that are coming up on a frequent basis, that supervisor has an obligation to address it. Sometimes it could be a situation of counseling. You know, police officer, like any other human being, they have personal problems at home. They have financial problems. They have all kinds of issues, and some simply aren't fit to be police. But the bottom line is that you know, if this deep dive analysis is done, you know, hopefully what one can figure out is, okay, you've had officers on the gun trace task force that came into this department back in the early to mid 2000s, and what happened during the course of their particular career that allowed them to climb that ladder to the point where they were able to join a unit that had so little controls on its integrity. And so it's important, you know, for this department to take the bad events like Harlem Park. I think they've taken that event and they've turned it around, and they have incorporated protocols and reforms that have made the department better. And I know it's my view, and I believe it's the view of those of my team members on the monitoring team, that the same thing is done with respect to the gun trace task force. As bad as that event was, there are lessons learned that can come out of that, so that, you know, you never say never again will it happen, but you can certainly reduce the risk of having another scandal like this department had to endure in early 2018.
That makes sense. So do we have any new questions? Questions from you guys? We still got about 10 more minutes. We want to ride it out. While we have a chance, we want to remind everybody about tomorrow's quarterly public report forum at Oliver Community Center, hosted by Out for Justice. We'll be there at 6 o'clock. It's open to the public. It's your opportunity to ask any questions that you may have concerning BPD, current events, or really just your opportunity to speak on the situation in your community, and make sure those type of things come under the purview of the monitoring team. So we'll be, this is the flyer. We'll be at 1400 East Federal Street tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. And we'll definitely give another overview, more in depth, and we'll also give a preview of what's to happen the following week on the 25th at the federal court at that public hearing. So we hope you all can make it tomorrow. And if you have any more questions, please reach out tonight.
We thank Spike Lee for coming in and directing this resource.
And just before we get into our little acting crazy because it's almost over, I just wanted you guys to know that Dr. Daniel said, thank you, Ray, and the monitoring team for being with us. So really, we're starting to become that asset that the community needs to help them perpetuate.
And Dr. Daniels, what I would encourage you to do, and I encourage everyone who's listening, you know, it's not, when we attend these public forums and when we attend community meetings and we go out and we meet folks on corner crawls or whatever we're doing, you know, we obviously want to hear from you in terms of the problems that you're seeing, the things that need to be addressed. But, you know, let's face it, folks, I mean, I think we have the best monitoring team in the country, but we don't have all the answers. And you folks who've lived in this town for 40 and 50 and 60 years, and then, you know, the younger folks who've lived here 20 years, sometimes you may have an idea that we need to hear from you, because we might be able to incorporate it in some of the suggestions we're making to the department. So again, I cannot overemphasize how important it is that we have community engagement, and that just doesn't mean bringing, you know, the bad things that you see. We know that there are lots of challenges with this department, and I think, you know, that over time it will be remedied, but it's going to take time. But we also want to hear the good things, and we also want to get suggestions from folks in the community in terms of what we can do to make this process better for the department and better for the community.
Right. And I'll just follow up with anyone that's known how I've done my work for the past decade. It's been about asset-based community development. And this is pretty much a cloning of that same model where we feel every citizen in Baltimore City can be an asset to this process. So like Ken said, it's not just about reporting incidents of police misconduct, because we want to know what the excellent officer in your community is doing every day, so we can present that to the courts as well, so that can be replicated. And we also want to know your ideas on how this can be better or what works in your community, because like Ken said, we don't live all over the city, and we definitely do not know the answers. That's kind of the mantra.
Those are everything. We know some answers, but we don't know the answers.
We don't know all the answers, but that's the mantra, is community is the answer. So if we continue to present a collaborative voice in these conversations, eventually we'll come up with the proper model to move this city where we're trying to go with this consent decree. Hi, Ally. Okay.
Any more questions?
No, we got a pop-on visitor, but that's about it for what we have tonight. We got about 5 minutes. You got a closing statement, sir?
I mean, all I can say is, you know, over the course of the next few months, you know, we're going to continue to focus on training, and we're beginning our own, what we call outcome assessments and compliance reviews. So the first year and a half of this process for us as the monitoring team has, as Ken and I have said, been focused on policies and training, both helping the department come up with policies that reflect best practices and helping the department come up with training programs that reflect national best practices. What we're starting to do now is comprehensively evaluating certain aspects of departmental operations to determine compliance with the consent decree. And where we're starting is what Ken was talking about for quite some time before, which is internal affairs investigations. So right now we have 6 of our team members that are poring over a statistically significant sampling of internal affairs investigations from the year 2018 to determine, you know, are complaints being taken in the right way? Is the department or is internal affairs communicating with complainants like they should? Are files being papered and documented the way they're supposed to be papered and documented? Are investigators reaching out to the right witnesses? Are they collecting the right evidence? And are they reaching, you know, fair evaluations based on the evidence about how the investigation should go? I mean, about what the outcome of the investigation should be. And once the investigation is over, if there's a recommendation for discipline, you know, is the trial board doing the right thing with that recommendation from internal affairs? The trial board is, you know, the panel that ultimately adjudicates whether a violation has occurred, and if so, what the punishment should be. So we're taking a top-to-bottom look at that for year 2018.
That includes the commissioner as well.
Yeah, and that includes the commissioner, and because the commissioner is the ultimate decision maker with respect to punishment. And then we're going to do that every year going forward. But you know, this is our first initiative in terms of compliance reviews. We're doing the same thing with incidents involving uses of force, the same thing with stop, searches, and arrests, the same thing with sexual assault investigations, the same thing with, you know, free speech activities, First Amendment protected activities. We're going to be doing these comprehensive reviews increasingly over the life of the consent decree, because once the policies are in place and once the training has been done, we have to evaluate, you know, whether those policies and whether that training is taking root, whether it's making an impact in the way that, you know, officers conduct themselves on the street. And that's really going to be our principal job in the last several years of the consent decree. But we're starting now.
Thank you, sir. So, as we close out, we just want to remind everybody about tomorrow's quarterly public report form at 1400 East Federal Street. And just a quick shameless plug, if you want to find out more about what the community engagement arm of the monitoring team is doing every month, please reach out and subscribe to our monthly newsletter just to know where we're at, where we're going, and what's coming up with the monitoring team. Also, we list the policies that Seth and Kim spoke on that are actually open for public comment during that month. You have something else, Dave?
So thank everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody. Good night.
Thanks for sticking around.